March 12th, 2016, and I'm recording this from my home in Madison, Mississippi. I entered the Army via the Reserve Officers Training Corps, ROTC, when I started in college. I went to a college called Western Maryland College. It has now been renamed McDaniel. And there for 4 years, I was an ROTC cadet. And so those were my first experiences in the Army. When I graduated, I was a second lieutenant, and I got a 3-year deferment while I went to graduate school and completed my PhD in economics from Duke University. When I left Duke, my first assignment as an officer was, and I was a first lieutenant at that time, was at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, where I was a project officer for approximately 1 year. And again, I did a lot of traveling, went to Fort Ord, California, because I was the project officer for Southeast Asian Night Operations Equipment, Night Ops, and to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, where I was a project officer for SATCOM, Tactical Satellite Communications. And I learned a lot in those positions regarding management skills and how to deal with authority, both from the upper end and the lower end. So I learned a lot that first year. And of course, then I became a captain and I was sent to Vietnam.
My name is Emily Penn Hoff. I'm the daughter of Bill Penn, and I'll be asking him some questions from behind the camera for the remainder of this interview. So, Dad, before you were about to head overseas to Vietnam, what was the mood of the country like at the time?
Yeah, at that time, as I remember it, and of course it's been many years ago, but it was kind of confused. There was a lot of anti-war sentiment that was being promoted by certain groups. And so the question was, should we get more involved in this Vietnamese conflict? Or should we get out and basically allow the Chinese to take over a lot of Southeast Asia? And by the way, I don't want to take too much time on this, but there was an internal war between China and Russia regarding who would dominate Southeast Asia. And of course, we decided to stay in, and the rest is history.
How did your family feel about you going overseas for a year or more? I mean, they probably didn't know how long you'd be gone before you left.
Yeah, my family was very supportive. Obviously, they knew that this was a possibility when I went into the Army. And again, I was doing fairly well at Fort Belvoir, but because of my change in rank, becoming a captain, I was called to serve in Vietnam. And obviously, they were a little apprehensive, as any loving family would be. But again, I think they trusted in the Lord to take care of me.
Did you have to do special training between your time at Fort Belvoir and actually being sent overseas?
No, not really. Most of my training was done prior to Fort Belvoir. I had to go to Officers Basic, which was in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where I was trained as an artillery officer. And by the way, that was my MO. I was artillery, field artillery. So again, most of that training was done before I went to Vietnam.
So when it was time to actually pack your bags and head overseas, how did you get there? How did you actually get to Vietnam?
I flew, obviously. I flew into California and then flew via plane to Alaska and to the Philippines, and I entered Vietnam at Cam Ranh Bay, which is where most of the soldiers at that particular time entered Vietnam.